So we are continuing our discussion on separation. Separation from Krishna. We've taken this course to a new level. Now it's separation from Krishna. My microphone is in front of this beautiful t-shirt. Oh, it's backwards, huh? Can you read that or no? Yes. What does it say?
Festival of the Holy Week.
Oh, okay, good. So now my mic goes in front of it. I can put my mic up here. Then you could see, right? I'll come a little closer. So the last class we had a discussion. We had a discussion about is there love in the material world? And we discussed how Prabhupada uses the word love in different contexts. And in the absolute sense, he uses the word love as prema. And that's why he said there's no love in this world, because he's using that context. And then other times he would talk about even animals love their children. We talk about the devotion of a wife, the love she has for her husband, the sati, right? She couldn't live separated from her husband. The love the disciple has for the guru, the affection, how we show affection to family by helping them become Krishna conscious. So one of the points that came out, I don't know if you picked up on it, is that whenever sometimes when we're discussing things in Krishna consciousness, sometimes there's misunderstanding because of how we're defining what it is we're discussing. So in this case, we were discussing love. So we could get in all kinds of disagreements about the meaning of love and how Prabhupada uses it, because he uses it in different contexts. And then there's also cases where Prabhupada will say something that appears to be exactly the opposite of what he previously said. And then we have to understand context, and we have to understand definition. And then I think this discussion was precipitated partially by the idea that how can you feel separation if you don't love somebody? And we were saying that there is a kind of separation that you feel even on the stage of bhajan or kriya, on the very beginning stages of bhakti, because you're feeling separation in the sense from your relationship with Krishna, separation from Krishna consciousness. I don't have Krishna consciousness. I want it. I need it. I don't have it. So you're feeling separation in that way. So it's a kind of a separation that we also feel. Separation from good sadhana, separation from good chanting, separation, and also separation from the association of devotees who we are very dear to us, whose association we value. So we do experience separation, but it's not the separation that's experienced by the Brajbasis. That separation is based on prema. So therefore, when we're talking about separation, that's usually the focus, is the feelings of separation of the Brajbasis, the feelings of separate, especially Radha's feelings of separation, and then Mahaprabhu's mood, which is to feel what Radharani is feeling. So that's generally the focus. But there are other aspects of separation where the disciple will feel separation from their guru, where Prabhupada felt separation from his spiritual master. At the same time, he felt his spiritual master was always with him. So, these seem to be contradictory feelings. They can exist simultaneously. Life in Prabhupada's time with his spiritual master was different than life without his spiritual master. That will always be a fact. But there is presence by word. So Prabhupada was feeling the personal presence of his spiritual master, but also feeling the separation and seeing the dissolution of the Gaudiya Math and how that was caused by his absence. And we often feel the same way when we see problems. We think, oh, if Prabhupada were here, he would resolve that. Either the problem wouldn't exist or he would resolve the problem very quickly. Boom, 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 it would be resolved. So we're going to begin reading from where we left off. And as I mentioned, some of this is going to be esoteric. Maybe all of it's going to be esoteric because it's such a high topic. And some of you know this, but the nectar of devotion, the first third or so of the nectar of devotion is pretty clear, but as you read into it in terms of rasa, especially the last parts, you may not understand everything. Even if you're a senior devotee, understanding rasa tattva is sometimes confusing. And one of the devotees had written to Prabhupada in 1970, because Prabhupada had asked us to read Nectar Devotion every day. So, eventually we got to the parts we couldn't understand. And so he wondered if we should wait to read them until we're more advanced. And Prabhupada said, just read them even if you don't understand, and then read them again. Read them again, read them again. So we know it's not an intellectual understanding, but we know that intellect is required, but we also know that it's purifying and purification of the heart will allow us to understand. So you have both things going on. So therefore, you may wonder, why is he reading all these very elevated, esoteric things? Because they exist, and we will try to explain what they mean, so you won't become a sahajiya or have some problem in Krishna consciousness, or think that you have prema or something like that. Well, but we want to read what Prabhupada said because it's there and he wants us to read his books. Okay, so this is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, chapter 4, text 108. Just as Radhika went mad at the sight of Uddhava, so Lord Chaitanya was obsessed day and night with the madness of separation. Because Uddhava looked like Krishna. Purport. Those under the shelter of the lotus feet of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu can understand that his mode of worship of the Supreme Lord in separation is the real worship of the Lord. When the feelings of separation become very intense, one attains the stage of meeting Sri Krishna. Interesting. I'm going to read that again. I'm going to read both those sentences again. I think for some of you, this is the first time you're hearing this. You may not have read Chaitanya Charitamrita or read all of it. Those under the shelter of the lotus feet of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu can understand that his mode of worship of the Supreme Lord in separation is the real worship of the Lord. When the feelings of separation become very intense, one attains the stage of meeting. 2 points to remember, and we discussed this a little bit last time. Separation is the real worship of Krishna. It's like the highest position. And that in separation, you're actually meeting Krishna because Krishna is absolute and you're completely absorbed in thinking of him. And therefore, he is present in, you can make Krishna out of wood or metal or marble. You can also make him out of mind. Mind is a material element, so you can make Krishna out of your mind. So you're actually meeting him in your mind by meditating on him, because that's what happens when you're feeling separation. Your meditation is fixed. Continuing to read. So-called devotees like the Sahajiyas cheaply imagine they are meeting Krishna in Vrindavan. Such thinking may be useful, but actually meeting Krishna is possible through the attitude of separation taught by Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. So the devotee doesn't think that I'm seeing Krishna. The devotee thinks, I want to see Krishna. Krishna is not here. And that's you experience a higher level of love, of bhakti in that feeling. And thinking that I'm seeing Krishna, that may be, but the mood that Prabhupada is teaching us to cultivate is that always thinking Krishna is absent, and where is he? I'm feeling his absence. And you can even feel Krishna's absence when he's sitting in front of you. That is another kind of ecstasy. Where's Krishna? I don't see him, or Krishna is going to leave me, so I'm feeling separation even though he's with me. So those are higher feelings. So we're cultivating, the pure devotees cultivate the mood of separation. And that's why they say, where is Krishna? Because they're cultivating separation. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, in his last 12 years of existence within this world at Jagannath Puri, taught the people of the world how, with the feeling of separation, one can develop his dormant love of Krishna. Such feelings of separation or meeting with Krishna are different stages of love of God. So now, there are different stages of love of God, and I think when we were discussing what love is, then we were defining love on different levels. Love, which is not considered technically love or prema, but for the sadhakas, there is a kind of love. We call that your sincerity and your obedience. That is your love. That's a manifestation of your love. It's kind of a relative definition, relative to prema. But it's also important to note that there are relative definitions of prema, because we always hear, Bhagavatam says, Gopi Bhatro Padakamalaya. There's no one who worship Krishna with as much love as the gopis. Kamyad Kaschid Bhajabadu Bhagena Chakalpita. The kind of devotion they had was supreme. So more supreme than the devotion of Yashoda, and more supreme than the devotion of Krishna's friends. So there are gradations of love. So the intensity of separation was felt most by the gopis. So therefore, they had the greatest love because they had the greatest feelings of separation. So there are gradations of love even in the spiritual world. Pure, more pure, purest. And so the purest love is the most selfless. And that's why we have the story of the gopis and the headache, because they weren't considering, well, if I give the dust from my feet to Krishna, that's not a good idea. I'll suffer for that. They weren't considering that. And some of the other devotees were considering that as an offense. It's kind of almost a smarta attitude. This is improper. This is not proper. But love doesn't look at what's proper. Love looks at what will make Krishna happy. And the love in which the devotee solely wants to make Krishna happy, and there's no personal consideration, that is the highest. And then Radharani, Srimati Radharani, she embodies the highest devotion, because her devotion reaches this point of her being happy when Krishna's happy, her being unhappy when Krishna's unhappy, and has nothing to do with her personal happiness, of what she likes or doesn't like. So we're hearing these things in order to understand what is love and to help us develop that love. And so now you're thinking, okay, love and separation. Should I cultivate separation from Krishna? And if I am to cultivate it, how should I cultivate it? Yes, cultivation of separation that is the highest. The And should we cultivate it? We should cultivate it according to our qualification. Because I said in the last class, and I think we all know this quite well, that if we don't cultivate love of Krishna, if we don't cultivate separation from Krishna, then naturally we're going to feel separation from things we are attached to, because that's the way separation works. Whatever you're attached to that you don't have, you feel a hankering for it, right? So that can be used in Krishna consciousness, but it's also the nature of this world. So it just depends if the attachment is spiritual or not. So I know many devotees who became very attached to Vrindavan or Mayapur. And if you go to their house, they have things from Mayapur, things from Vrindavan, dust from different holy places. They have pictures of Giriraj, Radhakund, Shamakund, different places. Prem Sarovara, like that. And so they're feeling a special connection with Vrindavan because of how nurtured and ecstatic they are when they're in Vrindavan, and they miss that. And so it is a kind of separation. Again, we have to redefine the word separation, because it's not the separation Mahaprabhu is feeling, which is manifesting these various ecstatic symptoms. But still, it is a separation which is nourishing our bhakti. So if you can feel separation, or you do feel separation, you want to cultivate feeling separation from the Vaishnavas, maybe from service that you can't do now, from the holy Dham, or even feeling separation from executing your devotional service in a better way. Maybe you were doing better last year. Maybe your rounds were better last year, and you're feeling separation from that taste or that connection. That all will help you, even though it's not separation as we're reading here. But again, the point is that feeling of separation, it's a normal human emotion, which if we don't cultivate it in Krishna consciousness, it definitely is going to happen materially. So it's kind of a replacement, right? So let's say Chaitanya Dasi was a violinist, and she had a very expensive violin, and someone came and stole it. And that violin was very important for her. She would be thinking of the violin. That's natural, right? You come home and you find something valuable has been stolen, something that's very important for you. You'll naturally feel separation for it. So we have to recognize that even though we might say, I don't feel separation from Krishna, we have to recognize that separation is a normal human emotion. And if it's not used in bhakti, it's definitely going to show up. And then you may ask the question, but if I'm attached to something and I lose it, it's natural to feel separation. And that's true. And the way Prabhupada would answer that is by saying, material attachments are natural, but you have to curb them. You have to balance them so that it doesn't end up having a very strong negative effect on you if, for example, you lose it, or if, for example, something happens to it. That's the risk you take. So I don't know if you know this. It's an interesting thing to meditate on. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said once, or maybe more than once, that it's better to rent than to own, because when you own, you become attached. And if you rent, you don't own, you're not attached. And yeah, you might get attached to your apartment or whatever, but not like when you own a house. Not saying, it's a bad investment to invest in a house, but it was just kind of a warning that the nature of the world is that there will be attachments, and that those attachments, if they're not moderated and balanced, could really throw us off. And I see this a lot when something bad happens to a devotee, like things are going well, they lose their job, or there's an illness or a problem in their marriage or something. It can often just throw them out of Krishna consciousness. Like they just stop their Krishna consciousness. They're so distraught. So it's not a good place. It's a very vulnerable place to be. It's a dangerous place. It's like you're driving 120 miles an hour on an icy road. It's dangerous. You don't want to do that. And you don't have snow tires. You're just taking a chance, right? So it's something for us to be aware of. That naturally, we have material attachments, but they have to be moderated. In other words, moderated meaning they have to be balanced in moderation, because it can really throw you off if you're overly attached, like too attached. It can cause you to lose your Krishna consciousness, not just for a few days. It could cause it for months or years even. So that's why we're trying to cultivate attachment to things in relation to Krishna. So the same attachments, if we don't cultivate it in Krishna consciousness, those attachments are going to be there. We all know that. And if we're not careful, they can become overwhelmingly strong. And so we have to be detached. It's like the story of Prabhupada had a business and he was being cheated and this and that. And eventually he took it as Krishna's mercy. He relinquished it because his family life was difficult, his business was difficult. When it was finally taken away, he took it as, okay, this is good. But a lot of times, if we're not that detached, when it's taken away, we grab it back. Even when it is not healthy, we may try to grab it back. So that's something to consider. So the point is, I think the obvious point is, we should if we cultivate attachments in Krishna consciousness, it will automatically create feelings of separation when we're separated from those things, right? If you go, let's say Chaitanya Dasi, if you go to Florence and you see the deities there and you're like, oh, those deities are so beautiful, and they let you make garlands for them or make their crowns or something like that, or do something. Maybe they even let you cook or something. And then you go back home to Croatia and you're thinking of those deities and say, I love those deities, I'm so attached. Cultivate that, get the pictures, put it on the wall, put it on your altar. Yeah, whatever you can do to create that attachment, or whatever it is. I'm attached to singing bhajans, or I'm attached to drawing pictures of Krishna, or writing articles. Whatever it is, those kinds of attachments will liberate us if they're done to please Krishna. So that's good. So then if we cultivate those kinds of attachments, then what happens? Then separation will be there when we're separated from those things, right? And we feel in other words, we means me, devotees of our age, every year we're losing one or two god brothers at least, or 3 or 4 god brothers and god sisters. We don't always know, but it's the last 5 or 10 years, it seems like every year someone is leaving their body, or more than someone, 2, 3 or more. And we feel separation if we were close to them. And that separation is good because we're thinking of a Vaishnava. And so that's good, because sometimes devotees they think, well, this devotee died, but he's not his body, so I shouldn't lament. That's the instruction of Bhagavad Gita. Be very stoic, very sober, transcendental. The wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. Be equipoised, all the many verses of Gita, especially second chapter about equilibrium, happiness, distress, heat, cold, loss or gain, victory, defeat. All those instructions to Arjuna. So then we lose a Vaishnava and we think, well, I shouldn't lament because that would be material. But in this case, we should lament. That is a manifestation of our separation. And Chiranilo premadan kuruna prachu. That song? Hena Prabhu Kota Vera Charge Thakur. I'm in the fire of separation. In separation, I'm burning in the fire of separation because I'm separated from all these great devotees. Mahaprabhu and so many of his associates are gone. And I'm left here to bang my head on the rocks, just kill myself. I can't take it. So you can't imitate that. But we so much want the association of Vaishnavas. We so much need it. So we feel great pain in their separation. In the Bhagavatam, I believe it's in the 4th canto, there is a story about the wives losing their husband and the wives crying piteously. And Prabhupada said, when the spiritual master leaves, the disciple should cry like that. And so when Prabhupada left, some devotees, not everybody, but some devotees, they didn't know if that was right, if we should take it, quote unquote, transcendentally and not be affected, or if it was proper or normal to cry. So Prabhupada had to put it in the Bhagavatam and say, yes, right? You should cry. That is that emotion should be there. That is the proper emotion. My guru, and we say, oh, Prabhupada is with us, Guru is with us in his word. So that's there, which is confusing because I think, well, why should I cry if he's still present? But Prabhupada's saying, no, that is the transcendental feeling of love for the Guru, that in separation, the disciple would cry. At the same time, that separation, it inspires the devotee to serve the Guru. In the retreat we're doing in Govardhan, there's going to be a section on Srila Prabhupada. And the goal of that section is to bring us closer to Prabhupada and help you deepen and strengthen your relationship with Prabhupada and feel as if you are a disciple of Prabhupada as his own disciples feel. That's what we're going to try to accomplish. And in studying the life of Prabhupada, there's a theme that I see. There are many themes. There's a theme, one theme I want to discuss. There's a theme I see that comes up. And it's that Prabhupada was very, very serious in Prabhupada. He understood Srila Bhakti. He was very, as they say, he was serious to understand Bhaktisiddhanta's mission, Bhaktisiddhanta's heart, what he really wanted. He really studied that, and he really made that his life's mission. So although Prabhupada had a mission, if you study his mission, you can see very clearly it was not his mission. It was Bhaktisiddhanta's mission, because he was always in this mood that this is what Bhaktisiddhanta wanted, a worldwide mission with a worldwide unified organization. And so that was the motivating force through all of the decisions that Prabhupada made. And, he had to make a decision to separate from Gaudiya Math. But that decision was a decision which was informed by that very desire that he carried within him of his spiritual master to form an international society, which couldn't happen within the Gaudiya Math. So he had to separate. And even after he separated, he still tried to bring them together to fulfill that mission. It was always on his mind that there should be an international mission with all his god brothers in the Gaudiya Math. We should all become one preaching movement, or at least in a certain way, all work together somehow, work together. So in that sense, Prabhupada was always with his guru. There was no separation because his heart was there. It's like if your father has told you something, like on his deathbed, this is what I want you to do. And that goes deep into your heart, and the rest of your life, you can never forget that. And the rest of your life, whatever you do, it always has to be in consideration. Am I fulfilling the order of my father? Is this what he wanted? So that's what Prabhupada exemplified. And I think it's extremely important for us to take note of that, because that's what it means to be a disciple of Prabhupada. Just as he understood exactly what it was that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta wanted, we want to understand exactly what it is that Prabhupada wanted, then manifest that in our lives, in our spreading of Krishna consciousness. And in that way, even though Prabhupada separated from us, or for you who didn't have his association, you might feel even more separation because there was never a meeting. But at the same time, when there's a oneness, Sri Caitanya Manobhishtam, when will my mind become one with Mahaprabhu's desire? When there's that oneness, then you feel the presence. You can't not feel the presence because he's in your heart, his instruction's in your heart, and you're executing that instruction. Like a lot of devotees, they feel that when they go on book distribution. They feel very close to Prabhupada. Or if they start a temple, or if they take up a responsibility in ISKCON, they feel, yeah, this is what Prabhupada wants. This is a big responsibility. And so I feel very connected now to Prabhupada. So there's this, Achinta Bheda Veda Tattva. It's inconceivably, you're feeling his presence and you're feeling his separation at the same time. They both go on simultaneously. But here in the transcendental realm, that separation is considered a more intense emotion, a higher form of love, because the meditation and the emotion for Krishna is stronger in separation. Yeah. I think I don't know if this is true for everyone. But in one sense, I think that we think of Prabhupada more since he left than when he was present. And the reason being is that the only access we have to Prabhupada is through thinking, through serving, through hearing. It's not like, oh, Prabhupada's coming to Alachua next week. So, I can be in Maya all week because I know he's coming and he'll get me out of Maya. Yeah. So, yeah. You're in separation, you're forced to come closer in ways you're not forced to when the person is present, because you can have their association by their presence, and it's very powerful. And but when they're gone, you can only have it through service, through hearing. But I think it's also true for us, even when the guru is present, because you can only have that association if you don't live with your guru. You can only have that association through the service, through hearing, through making your mind and heart one with your Guru's mind and heart. So cultivating separation it's good. That's the point. Okay. I think we can continue reading. Okay. So this next one is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 13, text 39. Translation. For the remaining 12 years, he stayed in Jagannath Puri. He taught everyone how to taste the transcendental mellow ecstasy of love of Krishna by tasting it himself. Purport. A person who is advanced in Krishna consciousness always feels separation from Krishna, because such a feeling of separation excels the feeling of meeting Krishna. Wow. It's a greater feeling. It's a deeper emotion. To us, that's like, no, I want to see Krishna. I want to be with him. And Prabhupada's saying, the feelings that you have when you're separated are deeper, which means they're more relishable. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, in his last 12 years of existence within this world in Jagannath Puri, taught the people of the world how, with a feeling of separation, one can develop his dormant love of Krishna. Such feelings of separation or meeting with Krishna are different stages of love of God. Well, such feelings of separation or meeting with Krishna are different stages of love of God. These feelings develop in time when a person seriously engages in devotional service. The highest stage is called prema bhakti, but this stage is attained by executing sadhana bhakti. One should not try to elevate himself artificially to the stage of prema bhakti without seriously following the regulative principles of sadhana bhakti. Prema bhakti is the stage of relishing, whereas sadhana bhakti is the stage of improving in devotional service. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu taught this cult of devotional service in full detail by practical application in his own life. It is said, therefore, apani achari bhakti shikaimu shabhare. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself. And in the role of a Krishna bhakta, a devotee of Krishna, he instructed the entire world how one can execute devotional service and thus go back home, back to Godhead in due course of time. So some encouraging words here. As we read about the feelings of separation, we feel like this is kind of like a foreign subject to us, or a foreign land, a land for which we have no experience. So as we're saying that feelings of separation fully manifest in the stage of love. And so if indeed Krishna consciousness brings one to the stage of prema, then consequently, these feelings of separation will be manifest. If we are cultivating bhakti in the mood of the residents of Vrindavan, then that is the direction we are going. That's how we're being trained. And so, Prabhupada is saying here that cultivating feelings of feelings of separation are a byproduct of love, but there's also, Prabhupada is alluding to here how it's kind of in a sense, you could say a sadhana. Prabhupada says, Mahaprabhu taught the people of the world how, with a feeling of separation, one can develop his dormant love of Godhead. But then in the next sentence, he said, such feelings of separation or meeting with Krishna are different stages of the love of God. So it sounds like two contradictory ideas. That it almost sounds like a sadhana, like cultivate feelings of separation, because it will help you in your bhakti. And when you have bhakti, you'll have feelings of separation. So it's both. And then you might think, well, can you actually cultivate feelings of separation if you don't have love? And the answer is yes. Just as, well, we could say, can you cultivate feelings of humility without prema? And, you could say, no, you can't, because unless you have prema, you won't be humble. But that answer doesn't sound entirely correct, because you need to be humble to have prema. So in the same way, can I cultivate separation? How can I, as a sadhaka, cultivate separation? But as we're discussing, in some way, according to our level, we should cultivate it. I think often when devotees are chanting their rounds, sometimes they do feel separation. It's a different kind of separation. It's a separation of missing Krishna for unlimited numbers of lifetimes. Especially if you have a taste when you're chanting, or you get some taste in devotional service, there is some feeling of separation, that I'm missing this, that I've been running after chewing the chewed, and I'm missing this. And I feel this is what the heart wants. So I'm feeling separation that way. So the point is, if we can cultivate separation according to our level, redefining separation according to our level, it will help us in achieving love of Godhead. Just wait 1 second. Prior to the time, after Mahaprabhu and up to the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when a devotee was initiated, they were told, this is who you are, this is your eternal identity. You are a gopa named so-and-so, this is your service, this is the clothes you wear, this is the camp you're in, etc. And some devotees think, well, does that mean that the spiritual master had vision to see all that? And the answer is, it was actually a sadhana. It was like, try these practices out and see if they help you. See if you are a cowherd boy. See if this works for you or makes sense. So that's an example of something which you would realize in a purified state that you're practicing in an impure state. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta did not think people were qualified. The people he was preaching to were qualified for that, so he stopped doing it. It's called Siddha Pranali. It's Ekadas Bhav, there are 11 features to your spiritual existence. But that's an example of how you can practice something before it's manifest in order to manifest it. So that's how that worked. It was a process of raga anuga bhakti. And, if you're qualified, it's nice. And you know right from the beginning, I'm a gopi, so-and-so. And so you're trying to enter that mood if you're qualified. Because eventually you will become qualified to enter hopefully, to enter that mood. That's what happens in the higher stages of Krishna consciousness. So that was being invoked from a lower stage as a sadhana to bring you to a higher stage. So that's kind of what we're talking about here, invoking, however we can invoke separation according to what is reasonable and right for us, according to our realization. And so Prabhupada is saying here something we've been saying, that Mahaprabhu, if there's a question of, is separation the highest, or Prabhupada's saying, well, here in Jagannath Puri, Mahaprabhu is teaching it is the highest. He's showing it. He's like, hey, look what I'm doing, because Mahaprabhu, as he's coming as a devotee. So therefore, he's teaching Krishna consciousness as a devotee. So therefore, what he does is instruction. And that's why Prabhupada quoted that verse. Apani achari, what you say, what you do, they should follow. So when the acharya does something, we have to say, look at what he's doing. What he's doing is a teaching. We can't just say, he's just doing that. I mean, you could say he's doing that to cultivate his own feelings in the mood of Radharani. That's there also. But here Prabhupada's saying he's also doing it to show, because some people don't think separation is the highest. They think meeting is higher. And Prabhupada's saying, no, in our philosophy, separation is the highest. And here's proof that Mahaprabhu this is the culmination of his Leela in the mood of separation as Radharani feels it. So he's showing that, look, this is where you want to go. And this is how you cultivate the highest levels of bhakti. Okay. Have a question from P in Sweden. I'm wondering, is it not in a way good to be attached, at least to our children, even if they don't choose to be devotees? If we are not attached to them, we might not give them the love they need to develop good people. Or is it possible to be good enough parents without attachment? It is, it's an interesting question, because we have to discuss the whole idea of attachment. Yeah, it's pretty natural to be attached to children. And if you tell your children, I became a devotee and you didn't, so I don't care for you because you don't want to be a devotee. So, just don't talk to me. You're just a botheration. Yeah, that would completely destroy their lives. And you do have a duty to raise healthy children. Be they devotees, not devotees. That for sure. And attachment is natural. And it would be quite strange if you weren't attached. When these topics are discussed within the context of Krishna consciousness, then we go to the Bhagavatam in the 5th canto, and it really illustrates this point well. It describes the life of a materialistic person, and specifically what happens to them at the time of death. And so it shows this man surrounded by family, and he's, usually people on their deathbed are trying to live as long as they can. Some people are hoping they could continue to live, and so they can continue doing what they're doing. Or they're finding it painful because they're going to lose everything. Or they see their relatives are pained by their departure. So it exemplifies this in the 5th canto. It shows a man who lived a materialistic life, and then at the end of his life, he's not at all keyed into his spiritual progress. He's just thinking about everyone and everything in this world that he's missing or going to be missing. And then it describes his next life, how in his next life came or developed because of how he was thinking at death. And how he was thinking at death was a manifestation of the attachments he had while he was alive. So that's one story to show, be careful what you're attached to, or be careful, not what you're attached to as much as how attached you get, because some things, like we're saying here, it would be strange if you weren't attached. You don't stop cooking. I'm a devotee, my kids aren't. I'm going to stop cooking for them, giving them an allowance and like that. That way you would be a bona fide fanatic for doing that, right? And then there's the other story that you may know. That Bharat Maharaj had raised a newborn deer. What do you call a newborn deer? Doe? A doe? Is that it? Maybe. Anyway, there was a mother, I think she was being hunted, and she just gave birth to her doe. Is that it? No? What is it? Nobody knows. Anyway. And so there's this helpless little baby deer calf. It's a doe? Yes. She's finding out.
Fawn.
Fawn. Fawn. Oh yeah, sorry. Fawn. What's a doe? Doe-eyed.
Female deer.
Female deer is a doe. Oh, fawn and a doe. So yeah, I don't know if it was a fawn or a doe. So I don't know if you've seen little baby deers. They're quite cute. So Maharaj Bharat, he couldn't let this deer die. The deer was dependent on him. But what happened in course of time, he became more attached to the deer than to his sadhana. And then one day the deer ran away and he couldn't find it. And he was looking for it. And I think he fell over and died while he was looking for the deer. He was really feeling separation. And then in his next life, he became a deer. So why is that story there in the Bhagavatam? Why are there both those stories there in the Bhagavatam? They're there to show us that you have to be careful what you're attached to. So I think it would be weird not to be attached to your children. But if you're so attached that when it's time to die, you can't die because you're thinking, I can't leave you, I can't leave you. You should, at the end of life, you should be thinking, Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. So, it's all about balancing that. I mean, that's the goal. That's what we're practicing. The verses in Gita, Yam Yam Vapi Smaram Bhavam, Tyajayanti Kalevam, whatever you're thinking of, Tyajayanti Kalevam, when you give up your body. Amtam Vaite Konteya. Parasa Bhava Bhavita, that's where you go. So that's the idea. As Prabhupada said, attachment will be there. That's normal. It would be weird if it wasn't. But too much attachment could put you in this position where instead of being Krishna conscious, you're conscious of the things that you're attached to. I can't leave, I can't leave. Which is why sometimes we say that when things don't go well in life, it's actually a blessing. I don't know if you've been in situations where things were very, very difficult. And sometimes they get so difficult, it's like you become detached from everything. You don't care about anything. It's painful. Usually it's an emotional pain more than physical. So Krishna creates those situations in our life. He's trying to neutralize our attachments. Sometimes like you have children and you want the best for them and they turn out not exactly the way you wanted. And sometimes they're not nice to you and they only call you when they need money and things like that. So he's also doing that to help us. Say, don't get so attached. This is, it can't necessarily be the way you want it to be. And so sometimes when things are really good, a devotee might think, well, this is not good because it's so good that I'm having a difficult time being detached. It's problematic for my spiritual life. So from a materialistic point of view, this sounds a little fanatical. But from the perspective of that this life is meant for going back to Godhead, then it makes sense. Like, if you're in university, all your friends are just goofing off, going to parties, this and that. If you follow that path, you'll never graduate. You'll fail all your classes. So as a good student, you just don't do that stuff and you focus on your studies. So, it's a bit like that. People might think, oh, your Hare Krishnas are weird or fanatical or whatever. Say, but we're trying to graduate. That's why we're like this. So we're concerned about where our mind and heart go, because we're trying to cultivate that dormant love for Krishna. And if it goes to things of this world too intensely, it blocks the process. It gets in the way. So when you look at it in the context of this, I want to make this my last life and I want to go back to God, this all makes sense. If you don't look at it that way, this looks like we're being weird or fanatical or something's wrong with us or insensitive. You know that story in the Bhagavatam, Maharshi Ketu didn't have a son, and then Narada blessed him with a son. He said, but your son will cause you happiness, but he'll cause you distress. And his co-wives poisoned the son. Wow, cost him. Boy, I think that as the story goes, he was born and then they poisoned him. They were envious. And then kind of the killer of this, Chitraketu was so attached, which kind of the killer was Narada Muni brought him back to life. And he said, here's, your father is missing you and this and that. And boy said something like kind of heartbreaking for a parent. He said, your parents are missing you. And he said, which parents, which life? Like, ah. But, these are things, these stories are there to just keep us balanced. Okay. Is that all right? If it's not all right, you can continue asking. So from Krishna Karshini. Recently, a friend of mine told me that she is regretting that she has attachment to her guru because after finding out that he did nothing to stop child abuse right now, she terribly suffers. She terribly suffers. Surfing is fun. No, she suffers. 2 F's. I know about surfing. I don't know about suffering. I stopped suffering when I became. I suffer also sometimes. I suffer when others suffer. And now she terribly suffers because she feels she gave heart to not the right person and her heart is broken. I'm sorry for a very controversial question. But is it not risky to be attached to a guru who is, there's a thing on my thing covering, I guess, not Uttama Adhikari, and there's a chance guru will fall or make a mistake that will break our heart. Now we experience in our movement lose faith in gurus in general. Devotees feel cheated, disappointed. I'm afraid it will increase. We'll be afraid to give hearts to guru. Could you please comment? Yeah, I'm afraid that it's going to go all the way up to Prabhupada. That's the next stage. If there's a massive lack of faith in present gurus, it won't stop there. And it's already, amongst some devotees, it's already gone to Prabhupada, and they will doubt Prabhupada. So I think we have to look at it in its entire context, because people say, well, Prabhupada's perfect, and this guru has said this and that, but Prabhupada this and that. But once you have that mentality, you can find many faults in Prabhupada also. So I think that's one thing to really take into consideration, because that's my big fear, because when that happens, the movement is going to really be broken. I'll get to answering the heart of your question, but I want to beat around the bush a little bit. I have noticed that there are certain devotees for various reasons who tend to be very critical of others and critical of leaders. And this is just my personal experience with me. Those devotees who were very, very critical of others, didn't get along with devotees, and they ended up being critical of me. It's just like it's a tendency. So it's like a bulldozer. Whoever gets in front of them, eventually they're not going to like. And that's my fear. So you have to be careful, because then Prabhupada will get in front of them and then they'll make offense to him. They'll find the fault in him. So part of the problem is expectation. What did you expect from the guru? Prabhupada said you don't have to be an Uttama Adhikari to be a guru. If you follow the Uttama Adhikari, if you represent the Uttama Adhikari. Otherwise, Prabhupada would never have asked us to be gurus. Many times he said, I want all my disciples to be gurus. Why would he ask us? Only because, and then he said, little qualification is you follow. Now, if you expect your guru to be perfect materially, then you're going to be let down. It's not that. He doesn't know more than you about a million things, but he may not know more than you about everything materially. And he may give you instruction and he doesn't know your situation, so it may be not applicable. But if we, number one, the injunction of Shastra is to follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas to the guidance of the current guru, to take initiation from that guru. But it doesn't mean that because I've taken initiation, that guru is the only person. Like my whole life depends on them. There's nobody else, no other instruction. I think a lot of these problems are a result of devotees not being deeply connected with Prabhupada. I think that's a big, big issue. Because if I was deeply connected with Prabhupada, I might say, okay, my guru is trying to connect me with Prabhupada, but he has his limitations, but Prabhupada is, my guru has taught me to take shelter in Prabhupada and help me understand Prabhupada. And I feel, very close with the process, with Prabhupada's books and teachings and like that. And I understand he's not Prabhupada and he probably never will be. But he has accepted me in the disciplic succession. And because he's accepted me, Prabhupada is accepted. And because Prabhupada is accepted, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is accepted and all the way up. So I am connected. And my expectations may change, as I grow, right? Like what you needed when you were young is different than what you need now. And maybe your guru fulfilled those needs when you were young and no longer fulfills those needs now. But that's life. That's okay. So Prabhupada is there, and there are other Siksha gurus. And it's true that as the movement grows and devotees mature, their tastes will change. So let's say, for example, you hit a point in your bhakti when you're becoming very, very focused on a particular service or cultivating a particular mood. And that mood or service is not the expertise of your guru. And you will need to find a Siksha guru to guide you. It could be deity worship. It could be, let's say you become very inclined to studying the Satsandarbhas of Jiva Goswami. And your guru's, his expertise is deity worship. Or his expertise is in the holy name. It's not in the Sandarbhas of Jiva Goswami. And you really feel impelled to study those or to teach those, or maybe to do a PhD in those. So you will need other teachers to guide you, which is fine, and it's to be expected. So I think there has to be some adjustment there. So that if I'm disappointed that my guru can't do this or that, that's an acknowledgement of the nature of that guru, but not a defect in the process per se, because you were connected by that guru to the disciplic succession. But at some point in your life, that relationship or those instructions may not be as important to you as they are to others. You also find in the history of Vaishnavism, like with Lokanath Goswami, Lokanath Goswami did not want to take any disciples. And Narottam Das Thakur was told, you must take Diksha from Lokanath Goswami. And Lokanath Goswami refused, and so he was told, you just go and the place where he bathes in the morning and evacuates, you just clean that up. He cleaned for a year, and Lokanath was wondering who's doing this. So one day Lokanath just went out searching in the forest. At the time, he understood that person would come and clean. He just went and he found him and said, oh, it's Narottam. Narottam was a prince, and now he's cleaning up Lokanath Maharaj's stool. So it melted Lokanath Maharaj's heart, and he took him as a disciple, but then he told him, I want you to study under Jiva Goswami. So if we study Vaishnava history, a lot of times we'll see that one guru will give the Diksha and then send them off. Like, okay, I'm your admissions counselor. I'm admitting you into the university. Now I want you to go study with this professor. So sometimes it can be seen that way, that this, and we know the relationship with the guru is important. But as Prabhupada says, you can only have one Diksha Guru, but you can have any number of Siksha Gurus. And that there's no difference between the Siksha Guru and the Diksha Guru, because they both represent Krishna. Because the Guru is Krishna's representative, or it is said that Sakshad Hari Twainam, so the Guru is Krishna. So that's why Prabhupada said Siksha and Diksha Guru is the same, because they're both representatives of Krishna for the disciple. So it will vary from disciple to disciple. Some disciples will find total shelter in their Diksha Guru, and that's everything for them. They won't require anything more, or they'll have one Siksha Guru, or many Siksha Gurus, or they will have grown in a way that they're much different than when they got initiated, and feel somewhat more inclined to another guru and feel a little like their relationship with their guru is a bit foreign, or maybe they never had one. That's okay. We don't want to be offensive to the Diksha Guru. So, it's real life, and we have to handle it maturely. That's what I would say. It's just maturely within the lines of the boundaries of our philosophy. And by maturely, I mean respectfully. I think, we have a challenge. Both the Eastern culture and the Western culture have a challenge. The Western culture challenges is we don't respect hierarchy very much. The Eastern culture challenges, they respect it too much. So we don't respect it enough when we see something is not like perfect. Even though the person's in an exalted position, we say, okay, forget it. I don't care you're in an exalted position. It doesn't matter. You didn't do this or you did that, and that's not right. And then we kind of pull them down, which in some cases we should, because if they do something which is not indicative of their position, yeah. I'm talking about smaller transgressions, slight imperfections, let's say. The Eastern system is, you're in this position, doesn't matter what you do, you're always in this position. We respect you for this position, in spite of the fact that you don't even qualify by your actions. That's the extreme other side of it, right? So I think as Westerners, at least we should recognize that we have a lot of that mentality where we're just looking at the person irrespective of their position. We don't even value their position. It's like, you may be this sannyasi guru, senior devotee, who cares? You did this. And I'm saying, okay, what you did isn't the end of the world. It's not like you're going to be arrested for it and embarrass the whole movement. But maybe you mistreated somebody, or maybe you lack judgment in dealing with some disciples, and we feel, well, this is not proper. You're a guru, okay. But still, we can respect you as, you've dedicated your life to Prabhupada. But maybe for me, it's not working anymore. So I have to respect you from a distance and take shelter of another guru. Maybe I've lost faith. If you've lost faith, or this devotee has lost faith, we can't come up to you and say, you should have faith, because faith is not something that we can force upon anyone. That would have to develop according to your own heart. But at least we can say, even if the faith is weak or it's non-existent, you can respect that person who has, initiated you. Now, in some cases, faith is totally lost. And if faith is totally lost, then that person has to find someone they can have faith in to guide them, be it Prabhupada or someone who is living that they can take shelter of. Or even someone who's not living that they can, because that's the process of bhakti. So, faith is very important. So if I've lost faith in my guru, or my Diksha Guru, my Siksha Guru, I can still respect from a distance, but if the faith is completely destroyed, then I will, if I don't take shelter in someone that I can follow and be guided by, it's going to be difficult. And as you know, what often happens is when that faith is destroyed, it's just, like you're saying, it's destroyed for everybody. It's like, I don't have faith in anybody anymore. And I totally understand that. And it's not necessarily logical, but it's often how one feels because one is so let down. Like, how could I have faith in anybody? But it's really unfair to judge another based on your experience with a person in a similar position. It's like, you know, if you had a problem with your father and you go to my daughter and say, oh, you must be having problems with your fathers because fathers are, they just abuse their daughters. That would be weird, wouldn't it? Because that was your experience. But does that mean all fathers are bad? No. Does it mean all fathers have a tendency to exploit their daughters? No, it doesn't. I think we have to give, reason, we have to look at our own condition and try to, give the benefit of the doubt to those who are sincerely trying to serve and don't give up on everybody and adjust our expectations and take more shelter in Prabhupada. That's really important. And a lot of the problems that we face today in ISKCON are consequences of devotees not being trained to develop a very close relationship with Prabhupada, not to read his books, hear his lectures, understand his mission, but everything through their guru, to the point where devotees would say, I don't know Prabhupada. I have no connection with him. I only know my guru. It's not really the way ISKCON is meant to be run. I mean, if we were a math system and, there's one acharya in the math, maybe you could say that. But even still, because Prabhupada's the founder acharya, then everything is representing him. So I think that's part of it. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question properly, but yeah. There's also an important point. I was reading a story. Maybe you've heard the story before. Or I was reading a purport by Prabhupada, and he came to Prabhupada and he said, Prabhupada, this purport is wrong. Could you imagine telling? Because Prabhupada was making a statement about planets. So the purport was giving a calculation on distance of planets, and Prabhupada was giving a different calculation. Now he said, no, Prabhupada. It says here it's giving the calculation based on from the milk ocean, not from Earth. So it's a mistake. You know what Prabhupada said? He said, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, then let's correct it. There was like no defense, right? So I think devotees sometimes, they question, can you question your guru, or if you think your guru does something wrong, can you say anything? And the answer is, depends. It depends on who your guru is, because, if you value your life, you may not want to say anything. But in the perfect world, the answer is yes. And I think we have examples of both with Prabhupada, of someone trying to, question and Prabhupada not allowing them to question, and sometimes bringing up points and Prabhupada would say, okay, and we'll do it differently. There's another example, Krishna Karshini, I think, but this is helpful. Because this could be used against Prabhupada someday. This is my prediction, 2084, there's going to, all this criticism you see online about gurus, it's not going to stop with gurus. If it doesn't stop, it's just going to keep going up. Because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had disciples who were criticizing him of all things. So I forgot what I was going to say. It's another story about.
You are talking about your prediction for 28.
Before that, I think it was a story where, devotees would, yeah, this is it. This is really interesting. If you've read anything about Varnashram, especially anything that Prabhupada said in the early days of the movement about Varnashram, he said, it's not possible to establish Varnashram in Kali Yuga. And we're not interested in Varnashram, we're interested in making Brahmins. Society needs a head, they have no head. We just need to give it a head. And that's what he said. So it looks like Prabhupada is against Varnashram. But then all of a sudden, on the morning walk, he said, we need Varnashram because our devotees are falling down, like sannyasis are falling, and we're trying to make them Brahmins and they're not really Brahmins, etc. So then someone could say, if you wanted to criticize Prabhupada, you'd say like, how can I follow this guru? He says, don't do it. Now he says, do it. This is confusing. That means he doesn't know. That means he's confused, right? What's going on with Prabhupada is the movement is evolving and he's observing it and he's seeing what's going on. And therefore, the general philosophy is Mahaprabhu's movement is the path of Bhagavat Karma, which is just preaching and not, the Daivi Varnashram stuff. It's like, I forget it. It's Kali Yuga. Then Prabhupada saying, no, we need it. We should establish farms. People can see how we live, invite people. They can be part of our communities and gradually, he's reevaluating the spreading of Krishna consciousness through experience. So he's changing his strategy, right? So that's normal. And so I think we have to recognize that a lot of what we may criticize people for doing, Prabhupada actually did. I can see it coming. Prabhupada established gurukuls, and gurukuls created so many problems. Kids were separated from their parents, and these kids were traumatized. If you want to blame somebody, who are you going to blame for doing that? It was his idea. So only a few people do that. But if a living guru did that, he would be smashed. He would be criticized for doing the same thing that Prabhupada did. So I think we just need to be careful because I see it coming. Because, if you want a good argument, that's a good one, isn't it? He established Gurukul. He was, 5 years old, kids were leaving. They're separating from their parents. Like, what kind of thing is that to do? And these kids, many of them were traumatized by it and inexperienced people being teachers. Of course, Prabhupada gave it to us hoping that we would manage it properly. But someone could say, well, why didn't he oversee it? You can find a million, and you can go down the line, why did he do this and why did he do that? And talk to all the devotees who say, I neglected my health and, I work so hard and now in old age, I'm trying to, I'm not healthy. And, why did Prabhupada allow that? Didn't he know Ayurveda? Why did he tell us it was okay to eat tons of sugar? You can just go on and on and on if you want. I think this is important to recognize that Prabhupada was, Prabhupada was doing Gurukula as an experiment. The whole ISKCON was an experiment. And he was seeing how it was going and he was changing things as it was going in the middle, evaluating it, looking at it. Is this going to work? This is the Vedic system. Can it work in the West? And changing his mind. So even Srila Prabhupada, from the material perspective, would learn about applications of spreading Krishna consciousness in the West, which was new to him, and make adjustments accordingly, and sometimes change. That doesn't work. So if Prabhupada's doing that, who's way more elevated than we are, then certainly, it's to be expected that we can have strategies that don't work. And we later look at that and go, that was a mistake. We shouldn't have done that, right? So we can't expect, because we don't even expect it with Prabhupada, that he'll be 100% correct on everything material. And he never claimed that he would be. It's just when he told you to do something, you wouldn't argue. I don't think we should do that. Generally, you wouldn't. Some devotees would, if they really thought it was the wrong way. But if he didn't, he would just say, do it. And you would have faith and go ahead. Anyway, I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. It's a real concern. Because believe me, If you want to criticize Prabhupada, there's plenty of things. What you have against present gurus, you could, you can go down the line. If you take things at face value, someone's daughter was dying, they came to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada just preached very heavily. You're not the body, why are you lamenting? If a guru today did that, you'd say, what kind of unsympathetic, how did this person become a guru? Their license should be taken away. This poor girl's dying and they have no empathy, isn't it? So you can find same conversations with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta when, a young person was dying and how he preached. And so, I think we need to be a little careful because sometimes we might be criticizing someone for doing actually what Prabhupada did or saying what Prabhupada said, I always wanted to do this, like take a very heavy class that Prabhupada gave and memorize it and then give it in Bhagavatam and get criticized for it. Of course, maybe I could be criticized because I'm not Prabhupada, so I don't have a right to say it. But I just thought it would be funny to say, how can you say this? You said this, that's not right. And I whip out the transcript and I said, Prabhu, I memorized the transcript. Everything I said was Prabhupada's words. Do you know, it's really funny, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta wrote an article and it was criticizing how devotees in the Gaudiya Math were living, luxuriously. Or too extravagantly, they weren't austere enough. And it was published with a fictitious name, so nobody knew that he wrote it. And so many of the devotees were like upset. Who is it? Who is that wrote that article? Who did he think he is? It was written by Bhaktisiddhanta. So, I think if a lot of us just verbatim said what Prabhupada said, we would be criticized. How can you say that? So that's why I say, if we're not careful, we end up criticizing Prabhupada, or indirectly we're criticizing. So we need to be a little sensitive. Krishna Karshini asked, what does it mean to cultivate separation on our level? I think we covered that. Does Krishna have the same feelings of separation with Radha? No, she has much stronger feelings. And that's why Mahaprabhu came, because he couldn't understand the love that Radha had, because it was so much greater than his love. And he said, I want it. It's like, let's say, Anuradha, I go to your house and you're listening to this classical music. And you're like, oh, this is so beautiful. And you're crying. And I'm listening to it and going, it's okay, But like, I really don't like it. And then I'm realizing that I was sleeping through my music appreciation class in high school. Basically, I was a rock and roller. So, they were playing Mozart and I was like, why are you wasting my time? Bring out the guitars. So we had a class to be able to appreciate real music, not rock and roll music. It's not really music as classical music is. So I say, Anuradha, I don't have that feeling. Can you help me get the feeling for that music? Because I don't have it. And you'll say, well, unless I give you my brain and heart, maybe you'll never have it. So it was like that. Mahaprabhu, Krishna has to take the mood and heart of Radha to feel what she's feeling, because her feeling of love for him is greater than his. And he's looking at it and go like, what is this? I don't even know what it is, which is so interesting because he knows everything, but he doesn't know that. So therefore he comes as Mahaprabhu. From P, thank you for a wise and knowledgeable answer. It clarified. I guess it means don't be attached to anything else. As you are to Krishna, always let him. Yeah, exactly. Balance your attachments. And you can't be totally detached because that's artificial. You can't fake detachment. It has to be genuine, because that will get you into trouble if you try to fake it, because you'll end up dreaming about it. When my husband was initiated some years ago, the first instruction given to him by a guru, sannyasi, was, don't get attached to me. Look for other Siksha gurus. My husband was shocked. Oh, yeah. Who said that?
Hanumat Prashak Swami.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because maybe in that part of the world, that country, that idea wasn't, yeah, don't, don't get attached to me as the only guru. Yeah, I'm not your only guru. Yeah. And, sometimes Prabhupada would say, well, Madhyamadakari is really not qualified to take you back to Godhead, but the Madhyamadakari is representing the Uttamadakari, and you have hundreds of Madhyamadakaris. So you think like all those Madhyamadakaris together can't take you back to Godhead. That like, why are we wasting our time? We should all leave ISKCON and find a Mahabhagavat, right? But our experiences by following those instructions, we're advancing, so it must work, correct? Okay, we finished all questions right on time. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So was that being recorded?